Good morning. This is Kamera. We're on day number 106. 1 Kings chapter 10 and 11. So, hey, how about Queen Sheba? Queen Sheba. Sheba, from what I read about it, is in Ethiopia. So the Queen of Sheba, she heard all these wonderful things about Solomon. So she decides she's going to visit King Solomon. She's come there bearing all type of gifts for him, gold, spices, jewels. And so she just questioned him. She tested him on all things. She had so many questions and she answered them. And she was so impressed with him. She even said they did not do him justice when they said that he was a wise king. But he actually, he was wise. Once God give you that wisdom that you asked for, he just asked for wisdom. I'm sure he surpassed what he imagined. But God did say he was going to be the most famous king ever. He was the famous king. And because of that wisdom, and he asked for wisdom in how to lead his people, he also gave him fame and fortune. So he received that fortune. He received the wisdom, he received the knowledge, he received the understanding, he received the fame, he received the fortune. I mean, people were just giving Solomon gifts just to come and listen to him. People just come. They'll come to him for counsel. They'll come here to consult about any issues they may have. But they would just listen to Solomon. And they would bring gifts with them. Solomon even had this fleet of ships. Hiram is still in the picture. Hiram ships would bring Solomon gold. It says something about ivory. He would bring him peacocks, silver. And Solomon, I mean, you have so much gold. What do you do, right? So he overlaid everything with gold. Seemed like, if you ask me, he built this brand new throne. They said it was so big you would have lions on just about every step near his throne. Solomon, he had it. What do you do? You have it. Yeah, it was excessive, but what do you do, right? Huge labor force, of course. But this is the thing, though, with Solomon. Solomon started to do some crazy stuff. But before we even go into that, Solomon had horses imported. He had, I don't know if the horses were imported, but I know the chariots were imported. And the Bible says that he had them imported from Cilicia, Egypt, because they had the best, I guess. And he had horses, and he would build the shields that he created would be flattened gold. Some weighed about 15 pounds. Smaller ones weighed about 3, 4, 5 pounds. But that's Solomon. What do you do when your mind come up with all these ideas? What do you do, right? What do you do? Let's keep it real, right? And this guy, he loved foreign women. The Bible says he had 700 wives of royal birth. And I thought about that thing. They mentioned royal birth. And remember, there was no war. There was no war during the time that Solomon was king. So if he had 7 wives of royal birth and there were no wars, it's like, okay, so these kings from all over the place just gave you their daughters. So you would think about it. They usually did that whenever they wanted to have an alliance. So was that part of his alliance? His wisdom, too, was to make alliance with these women. But he had 700. And you know what? The Lord told him, the children of Israel, don't marry from those other lands that worship other gods, because what's going to happen, they're going to turn your heart into serving their idols. He had 300 concubines. And it makes you wonder, okay, so he had 1,000 women. What do you do with all those women, right? Do you just keep them as trophies? What do you do, right? 7. I mean, it's only 365 days in a year. So he would see them, once every 2 years? I mean, it's just something to think about. But yeah, he had 1,000 women, 700 wives of royal birth, and 300 concubines. So yeah, Solomon was, he did everything, I'm sure, that a man would desire. He had everything a man would desire. He had the women. He had the money. He had their popularity. And, and you know what, guys? The bad part about it is God was right. In his older age, he did turn against God. And how did he turn against God? He started serving these other gods, worshiping these other gods, building shrines and Asherah poles and idols. And so, yeah, I think God was telling the truth that would happen. And whenever I talk to young men who feel like, they can't fall, even older guys who feel like they can't fall, I tell them, I said, Solomon was the wisest man that God has ever created. If he can fall, you can fall. So we have to use wisdom when temptation come our way, when we think we gotta have it. Do we really need it? So even though he had the money, he had the power, he had the fame, and all this knowledge, all this wisdom, do you have to? Well, if you read the book of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, he has some words for you from all that experience he had. But unfortunately, he turned away from God, carried away with his things, I guess. I mean, come on, he knew it all, right? So, yeah, and he was still gaining that money, that power. His ships, when they came out, were returned with like 25 tons of gold. Yeah, and then the kings who would visit him from all over would bring him gifts of gold and spices and different things. So he was loaded. And I think about some of those movies that have like those little treasure. They talk about treasure, Solomon's treasure. They're looking for Solomon's treasures. Solomon was loaded. What happens when we abandon God? Then, yeah, in this case here, God did not like it. And he said, as long as you follow me and you obey me and don't turn away from me, then all will be good. So Solomon was famous. Solomon was rich. Solomon was, wise and knowledgeable, but he was not wise in the way that he stayed with God. He didn't serve God fully. The Bible says he didn't follow him like his father David. And he didn't follow God fully. So I guess God was one of those gods that he served along with the Asherah poles and Chemosh and the goddess and all that stuff. So what God did was he raised up an adversary. In fact, he had two adversaries that were the result of when David went out and fought. Like their children were escaped some things that David had done and Jeroboam, and Joab, and now they had this hate that was built. So those were the adversaries that gave Solomon trouble in the end. However, how about this? God had spoke to one of King Solomon's servants. One of his servants was an official, and his name was Jeroboam. Jeroboam was promoted to be over the laborers. One day a prophet came and told him that God was going to take away 10 of those kingdoms from Solomon, and he was going to give them to Jeroboam. He told Jeroboam, I'm going to give you those kingdoms, but not while Solomon is still living. Once Solomon dies, I'm going to take it from his son. And you're going to get those 10 kingdoms, not Judah. Judah's always going to stay with David. As be that light. It's in Jerusalem where I reside because of David. But you're going to get those other 10. And as long as you follow me and you be obedient to me, then it's going to set well with you as well. But you're going to be able to get your heart's desire. Once I give you those 10. Solomon must have figured it out because he tried to kill Jeroboam. Jeroboam had to escape for his life. He went to Egypt. And so, yeah, guys, lots and lots of drama in this word. I say read it. Read the word of God. Ask God for understanding. We see how a man will rise in power, will rise with favor as long as he's staying in God's light. Not everybody's meant for all that power, though. So not everybody's going to rise. But this was a man that were over God's people. And God gave him his heart's desire. But his desire turned from God. He abandoned God. The word says he abandoned God. He turned his back on God and started serving those idols. Did he really think that he was above falling? Did he really? The promises stay with you and your family as long as you are obedient. And you know a lot. But did you know a little too much? Did it get overbearing for you? Did you get too much pride and think you couldn't fall? So yeah, Solomon, King Solomon. So guys, read the word. Look and see what happens. And you see how God did allow enemies to arise against Solomon. And you see how God did. He said, no one is above falling. No one is above falling. We have to keep our eyes on God. We can't allow those things outside of God to distract us. You are not above. I'm not above. There's a fine line. Now, one mistake that we make and that we think is, oh, it's not that serious, or we take for granted, can lead us into the next step after that, to the point that God is no longer our priority anymore. So let's be careful of that. Always be aware of where your heart is, where your mind is, where your thoughts are. Always. And this is the thing. Don't be so closed-minded from the truth about yourself. Ask God to show you who you are. I mean, even there are some times when I just want to make sure, I'll ask someone else about me. I'll say, do you think that I had the wrong attitude about that? Or there'll be something, because I need to hear the truth and I need to examine myself. Don't be so quick to just think that you can't fall. You can fall. Any of us can fall. So always keep God in the midst of that thing. And don't be afraid to ask someone who you trust the truth about who you might be. Tell them, I'm not going to be upset. I just need to know. Okay? So anyway, always take it to God. God's going to tell you the truth regardless. And it might even hurt. You just ask God to help you to accept it, give you a repentant spirit, and do better next time. Because none of us are perfect. And there are times that we are going to make some bad choices. And I'm sure some of those choices might disappoint God, but don't stay there. You saw an example of King David, how immediately he repented. Okay? So, and you better believe when it came to Solomon, you better believe God talked to him as well. And you know what? I think about it with Solomon. God said he was going to do that after Solomon was gone. He was going to take the kingdom from his son. I don't want that problem to fall on my children, so I needed to get it together. And so in this case, he took it. You'll see in the next couple of chapters. But yeah, guys, let's keep God alive in our lives, in our heart, in our minds. And if you hear something negative about yourself, do not be so quick to get so easily hurt that you cannot see the truth. Yes, it's going to hurt, but don't just leave it dormant. Seek that what someone told you, to see if it's true. Seek that about yourself. Ask God to show you if it's true. Show me myself, then give me a spirit of repentance. You know, you might want to ask other people. Sometimes people just don't understand us and they just want to believe those lies or what have you. But don't just disregard them. Don't. Okay, so yeah, in order to keep it real, guys, we just have to, and keep it right with God, we have to keep God in it. We just have to. We can't be carried away with our know-it-alls and thinking that people hating on us, because a lot of times people don't be hating on us. Sometimes we be hateable. We just do. So we have to ask God to help us with that. You know, a lot of people go around and say, they just hate. Are you hateable? You know, so you have to talk to God about that. I know there have been times I've been hateable. So I'll probably be hateable again. Just make sure it's not one of those where I'm so into myself. Make sure that it's just them. But the only way you're going to know for sure is if you ask God. And you might want to ask someone's opinion about a situation as well, someone you trust. So, yeah. And, you know, I tell myself, I don't want to hear that, you know, I don't want to hear what you think I want to hear. I want to hear the truth. So, yeah. So, anyway, we want to do whatever we do to please God and Him first, and everybody else receive the benefits of our love toward God, okay? So, anyway, guys, day number 106, 1 Kings chapter 10 and 11. You have a God-filled, blessed day.